Hello everyone, welcome at our core protocol sync. We'll share updates on the Subspace monorepo primarily and plans for the upcoming future. Lucheng, I think your changes might be lighter than for the others. What was happening on your side?
Okay, so there's only one thing, that is the XNet, which is about the executors. So last week we launched this XNet. So far we have 3 nodes. One is like RPC nodes, one farmer node, and one executor node, right, which runs as the executor authority node. So those 3 nodes looks fine. Like I don't see any issues so far, but I personally have like some issues with syncing those 3 nodes. Like there is no other nodes in this network. So it's probably like related to my own local network. I have this similar issue on the Gemini before, but recently it's just like everything is fine with Gemini. Probably there are enough nodes in the Gemini network, but there's only 3 nodes in the XNet, so I'm not sure. So I have 2 local nodes. They can like sync up to the latest XNet, but they sometimes just like fails to sync up to the latest block. They like firstly they can connect to the peers, but due to the like timeout, they soon became like disconnected by the peers.
Okay,
And
I have several questions about that. First of all, in which regions did those 3 nodes start?
So
Singapore.
according to the
Singapore. I started them in Singapore.
So all 3?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is relatively close.
Yeah, because Lusheng is the only one using it, so I just kept it closer to his location.
Okay, makes sense. Is it possible that it's related to VPN usage? If it's going through
probably,
VPN through some parts of the world that are far away?
But yeah, but I'm not sure. You know, I recently like have no issues with Gemini. You know, I
Which
use
node
it
of Gemini
on
are you
the
connected
same
to
network.
Lusheng? But which node were you connected to Lusheng?
Right, but if you are going out using VPN somewhere in United States, let's say, or Europe, then you need to go back to Singapore. So you're like making 2 round trips basically instead of 1. So it actually gets worse and not better. So I'm wondering if you can maybe like limit the node to listen on your like native interface instead of VPN one, so it can prefer that, or like I don't know. We need to figure something out, because I imagine the same kind of problem might happen to other users even on Gemini, and it would be nice for us to figure out the solution for those cases.
Yeah. I just want to like try to figure out why like it figured out like timeout, like which part is exactly like timeout, which takes too long. So I haven't like find this part.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
You know, sometimes it can like sync up to the highest block and keep up, but suddenly it just failed to sync. Everyone just like failed to connect to my nodes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you'll continue working on figuring out. Anything else?
No.
Any questions, comments?
I'd say, Lusheng, maybe we can chat after that. Maybe I can help you with that. If there are any connections, issues, and we can create that up.
Yeah, maybe Alexei has seen this problem before in some circumstances.
Yeah, I'll join. Let's set up a call for this.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Shamil, what about your networking updates?
Sure. Last week, I fixed the last comments from the team and we merged the large PR for the networking created, introducing the get pieces by range method to the DSN. I spent a lot of time debugging Kademlia branches from Nazar that will enable exact key search even without a network restart. I found several bugs in the first version and it didn't work, but the second branch from Nazar worked without any errors, and I had integrated it. The PR was merged today, and the code is ready for integration with the farmer. Also, last week, when I had time, I spent it reading about the current PubSub implementations. The Gossip Sub version 1.1 from the P2P library contains anti-spam mechanism based on the peer reputation, but they're considering the next approach now, which is called rate limiting nullifier, based on zero knowledge proofs to reduce spam threat. The same approach is being discussed within the Ethereum research group. Also, there is a specification for API-sub protocol that the P2P team considered as an improvement from the current Gossip Sub protocol that we plan to use, but there is no further development for a couple of years. I plan to ask the P2P team on the next community call about these protocols. My plan for this week is to start adding a publish-subscribe feature for archiving segments using the DSN. I will probably support Ivan with synchronization via DSN for farmers. And that's it.
Actually, on the epidemic gossip thing that they
Episub,
worked on, Episub, it was like under development for some time, and then it looks like Gossip Sub took over. You can actually join their IPFS Discord server, and there is an IPFS and IPLD and the peer-to-peer channels there. So you can just jump into those channels and ask a question. I think they are bridged into Matrix and Slack and somewhere else. So like a lot of people will see it. And if someone knows anything about that, they should be able to point you to some.
It seems that
some
Max
information.
Inden, which is a community calls organizer, has some interest in both protocols. So I want to ask him personally just in the call.
Yeah. Also, if you open this pack, there should be like interested, like interest group or something. There are like tags or like tags of usernames that like authored this specification or like discussed it. So maybe we can reach out to some of them as well.
Yep, and Max Inden exactly one of those persons.
Great. I just think that he might be overwhelmed with lots of people trying to ask different questions. So we'll just spread the load a little bit. Okay, so for this week, what's your primary focus?
As we discussed previously, it will be adding that publish subscribe feature to archiving segments in the middle of the between node and farmer, using not the current RPC method, but the publish subscribe method.
Right. Yeah, I was also thinking that right now we have multiple network instances in the farmer, and we can actually use the circuit relay version 2 protocol.
Yes, I saw
yeah.
that improvement that you made, that we created in the GitHub, but in my task list it is at the third place, right after that publish subscribe feature, and then testing that synchronization of farmers, and after that circuit relay feature.
Sure. Okay. Just trying to keep a little bit of pipeline in front of you, so you don't get stuck. All right. Any questions to Shamil about any of this? All make sense?
Probably we should coordinate with Alexei and Ivan for testing of that feature. So I see that as current workflow as we wait for Ivan to integrate and then ask for Alexei to prepare the testnet if he has time, of course.
Okay. Okay, Ivan, you're next then.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as talked before, during the last week, I was mostly working on the panelization of the PRs, which I talked about during the last week. There was integration with of the new sloth library, which uses the OpenCL, which was finally merged. there are still some issues related to docs which I need to fix. Yeah, I will do that this week. Apart from that, there was some ping-pong discussion around adding the GeoIP database for the substrate telemetry. Yeah, seems like the party guys are now testing that, but as I see it in the ICI, it still fails. Yeah, and apart from that, there is a PR which is related to the simplification of the sync. There was some kind of bug related to that before. Yeah, just let me share a screen. So we decided to simplify the sync mechanism and just update the algorithm. Yeah, so right now it looks something like this. Yep. Beforehand, we just went through the from starting from the public key in both directions from it, and try to sync the sectors, yeah, incrementally. But right now we just calculate in advance the sector of the sector of pieces in which we are interested, and right now we just iterate on those. So at first we just create the iterator of the different. Oh, let me just yeah, make it split.
You can maybe just open a final file.
Yeah, yeah, but that would be even better. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah, because like there are a lot of changes here. Yeah, so the thing is, we at first we just create all of the ranges of the sectors which we want to seek to sync. Yeah, we just basically split into the small chunks which we will ask from the GSN. Yeah, and apart from that, we just after that we just call the on pieces method. Yeah, beforehand we assumed that that basically the plotter, one who asks for syncing, it will just ask for a break after like all the needed part of the plot is synced. But right now we just know everything in advance. Yeah, and we basically sync all the 100 gigabytes, yeah, of the sector. This is basically how it works right now. Yeah, hope to merge with this PR today. Yeah, apart from that, I was working on the adding support of the backwards integration of the ParTDB. Yeah, there are still some issues. The pitfalls like which I faced like during the last week was that it is not very documented yet, at least for the B3 part, where like in the documentation, even in the like we don't have even this description document which we have for the like basically key map database, key value database. Yeah. So yeah, it took some time to actually get acquainted with the code. Yeah, and after that, there are still some pitfalls related to like how you can like implement everything so that there will be like no code duplication. Yeah, so hope to finalize it soon also. Yeah, and I guess after the finalization of the sync PR, we will integrate all the changes with the Shamil, and it will be ready for future testing of the GSN. Yeah, so work on those things this week, and maybe if I have time, yeah, I will also work on the improvements of the farmer. Yeah, that's it on my end.
Before I forget, I was adding that if false wrapping for the sync, you can probably remove it now.
Yeah. In that PR or like in some other?
You can do it in that PR because I don't think there will be an infinite loop anymore, so it should be okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay, any comments, questions from the team? Silence again. All right. Thanks, Ivan. Alexei, do you have anything to share more specific on this call?
I guess my work mostly was involved this week with supporting nodes, launching new nodes, but not entirely related to protocol. So I'll be glad to help with stages, testing environments this week. So I guess that's it.
Okay. Okay, makes sense to me. Um,
Can I ask a question about the
course.
test environments? So when you had that issue with the signatures, one of the things that may have prevented that is having some like test vectors to see actually if the signatures were produced in the way that you wanted them to be. Do we want to have something like that? Better later than never.
Yeah. So in that case, there were actually tests, but those tests were like generating the signatures in the same way that they were verified. They were not going from the same source. And there is still a long-standing issue open on our GitHub to actually have a proper test framework for those things. There is one that Lucian created. I didn't try to adopt it yet for those things, but we have many of the consensus-related stuff that are not actually properly tested on the client side, because the testing like framework environment that we have right now, it doesn't support submitting transactions. It's not a framework. It's just like some simplified version of the node. And because of that, we cannot run things like creating inherents with the root blocks to verify consensus of the upcoming blocks after that. Just all of that doesn't work. So we cannot actually run block production in those tests.
So can we test like specific parts of like, I don't know,
We are testing
deserialization
runtimes.
of a transaction? Or
Yeah. We are testing things in the runtime right now.
without the whole system, just like some specific.
The whole system is also actually tested, but it's tested by proxy in things that Lucian is testing. It's like he's running nodes and he's submitting fraud proofs and stuff. So all that is kind of like testing as a side effect, but it's not like purposefully testing edge cases of a particular subsystem. That's something we need to do.
Because like, well, for me, as I worked with integrating other blockchains and like signatures and stuff, it was very useful when I could find a list of like actual test vectors of like expected input, expected output of like signatures and transactions without having to run everything else, you know, without something that's been generated and tested right now, something that is pre-generated, and so you can test with every new change you have whether it has regressed, whether those tests are still working. Like some simple stuff, you know, the transaction should fail or the signature should fail if on the inputs that are like all zeros, you know, or some random input or some input that actually makes sense, like those stuff.
So that would be the case, I guess, if you were writing blockchain from scratch. However, we are inheriting most of those things from Substrate, and there are many tests in Substrate. So the fact that like transaction is decoded correctly is kind of tested by Substrate. However, we could generate a test vector that our inherent for the root blocks looks like this. Like these are the bytes, and we can store them somewhere. If you can describe it like more specifically what you would like to see, I think we can work on that. It's just like hard for me to imagine like what it would look like specifically.
I can find some of the links that the test vectors I found useful in the past, and probably send it.
Okay, so maybe you can create like an article in Notion describing like the proposal, like what we need to do and examples of how it's done and why it's useful and stuff like that. Okay, that's a good point. All right. Ved, do you have anything to share today?
No, just listening to everyone, unfortunately.
Okay. Daria, do you have anything else you want to discuss? Maybe questions you had that were not answered?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions about the spec. If I can share it, I can ask you.
Okay, if you don't think we need to do it on the call, we can do it later.
Yeah. I do want to ask if it's also connected to like the Gemini spin. So because we've discovered that keep blocks and pruning didn't work because Subspace doesn't have the finality of the substrate. In the spec, there is a piece about pruning the plot. Let me show.
I think if it's pruning the plot, it's different.
Uh,
Because history of the blockchain is not the plot. I mean, not in
yeah,
that sense.
I'm not sure. It's what I want to ask, like this yellow part.
Yeah, so this is not about the node, it's about the plot, where we are constraining the plot to store a particular part of the history based on the identity of the plot. And then if there is something outside of that range, because that range is shrinking all the time, we basically need to remove those pieces. That's what I think we are calling the pruning. And we need to replace those pieces with some that are closer to the public key.
Okay, so that's not the same pruning.
It's not the same, and it's not even like a separate process. It's just like ongoing thing where we are basically updating the plot. It's not like pruning. We are basically replacing some of the pieces with others. We do not have a way to shrink it directly, yeah, and efficiently. Because
so
if you want,
is it implemented though? Like,
it is implemented, but it's not implemented like as a separate pruning command. It's just like an update process. I can walk you through it at one of the calls how it works, or you can ask Ivan even. He knows about that
because
stuff.
this it's highlighted in yellow and says below that it's to be implemented. But if it's implemented, I guess I can remove the highlight. Or
it is implemented. Maybe it's not described correctly, or like not up to date description, but it is there. It is implemented and it works.
Okay.
That's something Ivan worked on, like, actually.
Okay.
On prod pruning?
Max plot size.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, there's supposed to be a doc related to that. Yeah, I think there is one, but it's not like in the general doc. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can take that one and update the general one. Maybe like embed it in there.
Yeah, if you could also share it with me, that would be nice, because there are like dozens. I'm not sure which ones are relevant.
Yeah. I believe everything except light client is actually implemented, just not all the descriptions are up to date. That's why they are still left the way they are.
Okay.
Okay, with that I can share my screen and walk you through my updates. Okay, I think it's loading. Okay. So there was a challenge with a few users reporting questions to GitHub. So I created this GitHub template that actually allows us to have this behavior, where if you want to create an issue, it will give you a link. And only if you're like a developer, you can ignore that and create an issue, like blank issue. We don't have a specific template because I don't know what the useful template would look like. It's just easier to write it like this until we have more requirements. But basically, if you are like asking a question, we just go to the forum directly. So that's a very simple one. Then there was this thing with the infinite loop. I basically made a simple change to ignore it for now, but Ivan has fixed that and will uncomment it. Then going back to finality, we did want to have this feature, which is keep blocks working in our protocol. So what I ended up doing is basically adding finality, but it's based on the archiving. So every time we archive something, at the very end, after we've like produced segments and everything and confirmed, we just call this finalize block function, and that function will apply finality up to that block on chain. And that in turn makes blockchain able to delete all blocks. And I verified it requires like 3.1 gigabytes of disk space to sync the whole subspace instead of 60. So it definitely works. And I even think that finality is like probably badly named in the substrate. It has like different meanings for different things. In our case, it's not really like a finality, but since we are archiving things at the depth of 100 blocks, and we don't expect that to ever be reverted because our archiver will break, that is effectively kind of like finality. That is the confirmation we set in the protocol. So that was implemented. Some of the nodes already upgraded. There is a Windows challenge though, so not everyone. Then there was 2 edge cases I described here about archiver restart. One was if you restart it and it reorgs right away, that triggers a bad behavior that causes the archiver to say, I don't know what's happening and crash, basically. So that was handled. And there was another edge case if you restart archiver within the first 100 blocks of the history, that was not starting again like ever. So that was fixed again. Just 2 edge cases. I had to change a few things, how they work, and actually simplify them because we had a few of those things that are optional. Now they are not optional when we return them from the initialized archiver struct. So actually it's easier, but there was a little bit of refactoring here. Nothing major though. And then, yeah, support link was broken or like expired to Discord. I think those are the primary things here. There were some things in Substrate. So one thing was RocksDB. I showed it before. It was finally merged. So I think we'll update Substrate and we'll disable RocksDB physically on the node side, so it will not be compiled in. And that should both improve compilation time, decrease binary size, and generally better. After that, there was this pull request, which was already approved, that modifies the sync process a little bit. Basically, the sync part of the substrate tries to understand whether it's syncing right now or not. And for that, it needs to know what are the heights of the all of the peers, like what is the best block of all of the peers that it's connected to. And then it does this in here. It takes like almost basically median height between all of the peers, and it treats that as the target where it needs to sync. And if that target is too far from the actual best block of the current node, local node, then it needs to sync, like it's in major sync state. Otherwise, it's up to date and it can claim slots and it can produce blocks and stuff like that. So the challenge in our network was that these peers are often, like many of them are actually still syncing. So the median is actually can be below your even local node, which doesn't make any like practical sense. So this change basically takes your local number and it just cuts off all of the peers or like the heights that are below that and ignores them basically. So it only accounts for the peers that are the same height as you or forward from you. And that fixes some of the pathological cases where it tries to claim slots where it shouldn't. This is basically a follow-up to the previous pull request that was fixing that 2K blocks difference. Just something I noticed and commented, so I decided to create a pull request. It got some approvals already. So that hopefully will get merged soon. And there was this another pull request, which is basically going back to the issue that Ozgun created. Not this one. I don't see it. Yeah, this one. Basically, there is no possibility to actually stop the node properly. If you drop everything and stop everything, there is still a client left in memory, and that client prevents database from being closed, and you cannot start another node because it's still the database is still open. I was debugging that issue, and I found that in Substrate, they create RPC servers, which is fine. And they then take those RPC servers. There is one feature for the WebSocket, and there is another one for the HTTP, I believe, above. They wait for them in here to start, and then they take both and they just like box them, and they store in the other file. In like they basically attach it to the task manager so that it's not dropped until task manager is dropped. But even if you drop task manager and everything, we still need to call stop for those servers to actually stop. Otherwise, all of the handlers for different commands like JSON RPC methods, they're still kept alive, and the RPC server is still very much alive, and that prevents everything else from dropped. So I just created this proper data structure that on its drop will actually call the method that is specified. And in that method, it will actually stop both servers. And that way we can actually drop everything and have zero reference to anything. We can release all of the memory and we can reopen it again if necessary. There is still a challenge with this. This is the first step to make it physically possible. There is still a problem that there is no deterministic way to know when exactly it will be dropped. You basically have to sleep for 100 milliseconds and check if there are any reference counts left on the client, and then check again and check again and check again until it's zero. Strong count on the arc. But at least this is the first step that allows us to physically make it possible. Otherwise, Ozgun has to restart the whole application from scratch to actually close and reopen stuff. This will especially be important when we have multiple domains, we have multiple nodes running at the same time. We need to restart them at will and stuff like that. This will just leak memory and problems for us. So this needs to be fixed. Apparently, Bastian is not convinced yet, so we'll see. I'll probably ping them a few days later if it doesn't move forward. Yeah, this is still over a month in review. There are some approvals, but it's still waiting for something for someone. I don't know. We'll see. Yes. So there was another issue on our OpenCL side. There are actually two. One is that the farmer. Yeah. Okay. I moved it. GitHub Subspace sloth. Basically, on Windows, when you have AMD GPU and you don't install, I guess it doesn't really matter what you install. I just sometimes fails with these errors, which indicates that compiler doesn't see some of this stuff. I asked the guys from Supernational to help, but I think I'll need to do some debugging to figure out why it's happening and maybe update the implementation to skip the problematic GPU, so we can use at least those that are not problematic. So in this case, if it hits the AMD GPU, it will ignore all the other GPUs, even though they might have an NVIDIA GPU that is still fully capable of doing OpenCL, which is unfortunate.
Can I interrupt you here?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've tested it in on the Windows setup with the AMD GPU, and I didn't hit that error.
Yeah, I think not all GPUs are the same, and maybe there are different drivers, or there are just different GPUs. Like iGPUs, they are more limited than discrete ones in terms of the feature set. Maybe something is not supported there, and we just need to handle it. This one is super low power AMD GPU. Let me see. It's sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing, I think.
It will be interesting to look at the specs of that GPU.
Yeah, that's a really, really weak one. Here it's 800U, low power Ryzen.
Oh, it's integrated.
It's integrated and it's really weak and it's low power, so it may not have all of the features enabled. And I even saw that many of these iGPUs are not actually OpenCL capable, or ROCm. Okay, just problematic. We need to find a way to work around that or ignore if you cannot support it, instead of printing this error. It still works because we just handle it and we fall back to CPU, but there is still an NVIDIA GPU, which is in this case the RTX 2060 mobile, which is still fully capable, so we can take advantage of that. So there was that, and there was another one related to not really clear what, basically upgrade from the 13th to 18th version of our node. Just coincided with the issue with the upgrade. They cannot start the node for some reason. There are two threads in Discord. We'll see. What else? What else? What else? Yeah, I think the last one will be the peer-to-peer. There is a pull request which allows us to customize how we want to serialize things or like convert things from PRD to keys. Basically, there is this data structure which is called key, and there is key bytes which is inside of it in here. And it was transformed from the public PRID or multi-hash or just bytes just by hashing it. And it was hashing the whole thing, not just the public key, which is unfortunate. In our case, we don't need to hash anything at all right now, but we want to hash just the public key, not the multi-hash of it. So this change adds generic to everything, and the generic implements a method which is pre-imaged into key bytes, which allows us to decide whether we want to hash it, we want to extract something from it. We can do whatever we want for different implementations. And this is something that Shamil was using to make things work in our case. So this is still under review. I think the discussion before was that it generally makes sense. However, it still needs to be reviewed. It's quite an invasive change in here. And with that, I think those are the primary changes I have been working on last week and will continue to work this week. Any comments, thoughts, questions about any of this? Anything else we need to discuss? All right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place.